I will mute everyone and just unmute the guest speaker. So let's do that now. Right. Right. You should be able to unmute yourself. Yeah, great. Okay, over to you.
Thank you so much and good morning, everyone. In fact, what's amazing is there's a few people here this morning who I absolutely recognize. So it's like home from home this morning. First of all, a big thank you to Rabbi Lister for allowing me to share time with you this morning, and to Stephen Jacobson, who was in touch and who was in touch with my office and ensured that we could be together. This is actually the best time of the day, because ultimately I've just dropped off the kids at school. It feels a little bit peace and calm and a little bit of relaxation time before the hustle and bustle of a rabbi's day. Rabbi Lister, I think you and I both know, it's full on every day, 8 days a week, 25 hours a day. There's no such thing as stop. But that's what we love doing, and that is why we're in the communal game. But again, a real pleasure to spend time with you this morning. And my wish, and I said this to my wife, certainly over the pandemic, I'm a real shul person. I love shul. Like for me, not being able to go to shul during the pandemic was one of the hardest things, not because of course it's my job and I'm supposed to be there and all that sort of thing, but just to not be in a place that is such, in my soul, such a big part of my whole identity was so difficult. But I remember saying to my wife, there's so many shuls in the UK that I've not had the opportunity of spending time with. And I say this, I would love at some point, Rabbi Lister, Stephen, make it happen. At some point, I would love to come and spend time with Edgware United. It's one of the most iconic synagogues in all of the UK, a rich history of Rabbonim and Chazanim. Allow me to bring the music into it. So at some point in the future, we're going to get something in the diary, and we can spend some time together. What did I want to share with you this morning? Well, actually, last night we are getting over, in a very positive sense, the presence of the Chief Rabbi who was with us last night. The Chief Rabbi is doing a whistle-stop tour of the north of England. He's been in Manchester, Sheffield, Nottingham, Leeds. Where else has he been to? Birmingham, all over the north of England. And I know he said this last night, this is the first time he's ventured across or rather ahead of the M25, certainly in the last 2 years. In fact, I think it was just a couple of days ago that I got a pop-up on my phone that reminded me that it's exactly 2 years since the first morning of service that we had the synagogue closed. And this is perhaps an opportunity for us to take a step back, to stop, to think, how have we changed? Have we changed? Have we forgotten some of those things? Some of those wonderful things. I mean, I was reminiscing, and it was mentioned last night. Do you remember standing outside for what, 8, 10, 15 weeks, every Thursday at 8 o'clock, banging on our pans and our pots and taking out? I remember one night was Seder night. Do you remember? Seder night. One of the nights of Seder was one of those evenings, and I think the biggest halachic debate was, do we stop the Seder to go outside and clap for the NHS? Absolutely. Because that is what we do. We remember heroes, we recall and give thanksgiving to all those wonderful people. And it's important 2 years later not to forget who those wonderful people are. People in our day-to-day lives, people in our communities who are still, the fight hasn't stopped. And ultimately, if the fight changes or the environment changes, the circumstance changes, these are wonderful people who are continually doing everything they can to bring us safety, security from all things, not just, of course, COVID. What I wanted to share with you in the now 8 minutes I have left is that we now move from Purim to Pesach. And ironically, if you look in the Talmud, in the tractate of Tanit, you'll see that when it speaks about Misha Nichnas Adam Marbim B'Simcha, when it speaks about the joy that we enter into over the course of the month, and this year it was a double month, remember, of Adar in the lead up to Purim, it compares it to the tsorus, the sadness of Tisha B'Av, of Av. And ironically, if you look inside the commentary of Rashi, inside that particular area of the Talmud, you'll see that Rashi links Purim and Pesach as one. Now this is a really interesting thing, because therefore that means there must be some link, some relationship between Purim and Pesach. Ironically, Purim, can you believe it's nearly a week ago just amazing how quick time goes from one week to the next. And if you think about it, we spend these next few days recovering. For some, it's a hangover from Purim. Certainly not for me, but it's a few days it takes us to transition from Purim into the realization, or for some, the nerve of heading into Pesach. In fact, just at the beginning of when I came on, I think somebody, I can't remember who, was talking about where they're going to be for Pesach. This is now going to be the conversation over the next 2 weeks. Have Tesco started stocking their Pesach stuff? Oh, they're quicker than Kosher Kingdom. Oh, Sainsbury's are cheaper than Pesach. And it becomes the whole conversation about leading into what I believe is one of the most beautiful and sacred times of the year, which is, of course, Pesach. But what is the link between Purim and Pesach? We speak about the simcha of Purim. Ironically, if you look inside the Torah, you'll see there are various words to describe joy, the different words to describe this emotion that we feel inside. And perhaps the most common are sason and simcha. Now, sason, and you'll hear this word many a time when you go to a wedding, sason is like elation. It's like something happens, and it's this lifting moment in our lives where we feel that something new has happened, and this change of emotion, this sudden change of emotion. And what happens with elation is we can go up, and then we can plateau back to normality. Whereas simcha is something so unique. And I heard the Chief Rabbi say this, simcha is the idea of nachas. It's a whole different emotion. And I think the message that Rashi is giving us as we transition from Purim into Pesach is that this element of nachas that begins with a Su'udah on Purim, and for many it's a big occasion, perhaps a little less so for others. It's like a taste of what's going to be over the next few weeks. Let's enjoy the conversation of Pesach. Let's enjoy shopping around for Pesach. Let's enjoy the elements, the true feeling of nachas that we feel at Pesach. We only need to look back over the last couple of years and realize that actually, and I remember sitting at the Seder table with just my wife. The kids were in bed. It was too late for them. They were too young. And us having a Seder, just the two of us. It was different. It was strange. It was weird to have to spend Seder just us. For many, people would have had to have spent Seder by themselves. For many, they will have limited the amount of people they've been able to be with over the course of Pesach. Now is a time, as we head into this the beginning of post-pandemic world that we live in, it's an opportunity to come back to the simcha that is the real element of being Jewish. What is that simcha? Sitting around with those that mean a lot to us. Having the opportunity of inviting those that we may have not had previously, to look round, and instead of waiting till the night of Pesach where we say, whoever's needy, come and join us, it's too late. Let us now put all those things into process, put all those things into action, and recognize that Simcha of Purim channels itself all the way over to this sacred time of year. It's one of those times, Pesach, where I believe more people observe Pesach than perhaps any other festival in the year. You'll find that certainly, and the pandemic has perhaps highlighted this more than ever before, that the attendance on Yom Kippur, the attendance on Rosh Hashanah isn't quite what it was certainly when I was a child. When I was a child in shul, where they had to bring out spare seats to be able to find places for people to sit. And it's like this, not just in Leeds, it's not just in London, it's a world problem. The world has changed Judaism in some respect, that many of the traditions that we have in the home have become perhaps more sacred because that wasn't taken away from us. And so as we head into Pesach, the time of the year where many people at the very least will get out of box to matzah and sit together with those loved ones, I think it's a real opportunity for us to realign or to reset or to process, as I said a few moments ago, our transition from Purim, the simcha of Purim, that nachas that we can find in our lives, whether we're in London, whether we're in Israel, whether we're in Leeds, anywhere. Let's try and transition into that simcha, that nachas that we have on Pesach. It's a real special time of year. Let's not wait till the week before, a few days before, when the shops start to open or start to stop. Let's start thinking about it now. Let's take that elation from last week and turn it into the nachas, the simcha that we can feel over Pesach. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm more than happy to take any questions. Stephen, I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear.
Yeah, no, okay, now. Anyway, yeah, everyone's welcome to unmute yourselves if you want to add some comments. Could I actually very interesting comments there. And I think all communities are dealing, as you said, all around the world. We've had speakers from around the world. Every community we speak to have got the same problems. You know, Jewish observance today or synagogue attendance and observance is not the same as it was, and people have got out of the habit of going to shul. Younger people, teenagers, younger families. It's getting, you know, it's a disaster. What are you doing to try and get more people inside your building in Leeds? What are you got any special?
It's a very, very interesting question, and it's something that we are working incredibly hard. I mean, you know, I always tell people don't know too much about the community of Leeds. So allow me just to share a little bit of that with you. Our membership is huge, absolutely huge. We have something like 900 people. I mean, really, a lot of people are associated to our synagogue. So we have many individuals. That was families, by the way. We have many individuals, and there's a lot of work to do. But you're absolutely right. This is not a Leeds problem or a London problem. This is a world problem in all faiths. I speak to a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends from different faiths, from different traditions, and it is a huge problem. Ironically, and I will say this, that more people felt something during the pandemic than maybe they did previously. I think when life is vulnerable, when our mortality is questioned, I think people like to look for something, people need to look for something far more powerful than they did previously. And I think certainly, I mean, whenever did we ever believe that we'd be stuck at home? It'd be law to have to stay at home. I never thought I would ever, I don't think any of us would ever think that we'd live in a time where such a thing would happen. But having said all that, I think people did feel something, have felt something, and there is something there that we need to build upon. I share with you that last week, and this is a very fresh example, just to highlight perhaps the inner feelings that exist at the moment. We had a Purim party last week, and I have to tell you, I've been with the shul for 16 years. I know I don't look old enough, but that's just good oil of Ulay. But ultimately, I found that last week at our Purim party, we had more children than we've ever had before in 16 years. Ever. We've never had so many children. We had a waiting list because we couldn't fit that many children. Now, we never had this issue 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where we were turning children away. So what's changed? What's changed is, for me, when it comes to events, when it comes to moments, when it comes to parts of the year, becomes big moments of the year, I think people are turning on rather than turning away. And I think that, for me, is a big lesson in how shuls need to operate. So, for example, I was speaking yesterday with the chief rabbi when he was asking us how our strategy has changed or is changing. We are recognizing, and perhaps this is a radical thing to say, we are recognizing that whereas before shul service, Shabbat, was the biggest event of the shul week, and probably the biggest event that exists on a shul's calendar, the weekly Shabbat service, and anything else was a bonus, an event to get together, a shir, a social event, whatever it may be. We're now changing the model and recognizing that attendance has changed, but if we build the events, then people get used to being back in the synagogue. And so we've completely changed around perhaps the dynamic of our shul. Of course, we have services every morning, every afternoon, every evening, and Shabbat morning, and it is growing gradually, and it will take time. And we work very hard on life cycle moments, bar, bat mitzvah, wedding, or football, that sort of thing, to build a service that I hope is enjoyable, and dare I put it in this manner, accessible to people. But I think our strategy is slightly changing to building the events so that people feel safe and sure again, and then they feel it's a place that they can attend on a day-to-day, weekly basis.
Okay, thanks for that. Anybody else got any comments or questions?
Oh, yeah.
No, okay, all right. Okay, thank you so much again for joining us. I did ask you a question actually when I actually just on the side when I first emailed you. Your name, okay, your surname. What is the relationship with the Chait family, who was the rabbi at who used to be the rabbi at Stamel many moons ago, Rabbi A.S. Chait? Is that a great uncle of yours, or?
Ironically, my initials are A.S.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but first of all, the surname Chait is not a common name. I mean there are some of you may have heard of Baruch Chait, for example, huge in the Jewish music world of the last 30, 40, 50 years. But it's not a very common name, and we do not have a big family whatsoever. We have a very small family. Ironically, I'm one of 7 children, but you know, above the generation, we're not so great in number. I know that there was an Isaac Chait, for example, that was in Sheffield. This is correct, and I'm told that he was a relative of my Zayda. In terms of the name Chaitovitz, I'm not 100% sure. I can't be sure whether this is a different family, whether this is a name that was shortened at some point in time. I couldn't even tell you that my surname Chait is one that was shortened at some point in time. I don't know. I mean, I know that, and this is always a funny one that I laugh with my auntie with, because ironically, most of us can trace back 1, 2, 3 generations back to where families came from Eastern Europe, and first of all, it's actually an opportunity for us to take a moment to recognize the challenges in the world at the moment in Ukraine. I think that's something that's important to mention at this time. But most of us, I think, could look back and see many of our ancestors, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents even, go back to parts of Eastern Europe. I always laughed that my Bubba was from Scotland. I mean, very not Eastern Europe. But my Zayda was from, Poland and Ukraine and that sort of area of the world. But I just couldn't be sure that at any other point in time whether the name was changed at all. I do come from a very musical background. In fact, I think the Edgware United Synagogue had an event not too long ago with Rabbi Jeffrey Schisler, who was speaking about
Chazanim,
of yesteryear, and I was very moved and very touched. And somebody made me aware of the fact that my father was one of the Chazanim that was spoken about. And I have to tell you, I watched it again and again, and I was very touched because I know it sounds the natural thing of a son to say, but I do believe and still believe he was one of the greatest Chazanim to grace UK Jewry. I mean, his ability was just unbelievable. But the world has changed, synagogues have changed, times have changed, and the rabbinate has changed. As Rabbi Lister will testify, certainly changed even in the time that I've been in the rabbinate. One of the things that I speak about a lot is how the rabbinate has changed, and we have done our very best to adapt to it. I've seen more people feel closer to their synagogue because of the personal contact that we made. When I say we, I'm talking about synagogues in general through the pandemic, and perhaps 10, 15 years anytime before that. Personal contact is one of the most important commodities in any synagogue life. Bringing somebody up, how are you? How are you feeling? Mazel tov on your simcha, happy birthday. Certainly something that we have always done in our synagogue. If somebody has a special birthday, it's not just a letter, it's a phone call, it's a bouquet of flowers. If somebody hosts the Kiddush, we want to say thank you. If somebody joins the shul, we send a whole pack. If somebody's going through a difficult time, a challenging time, a celebratory time, we're there every step of the way to show that it's not the place that they must go to or have a duty to go to once, twice a year, but it's like I always describe the synagogue as like a brother or a sister. Some speak to them every day, some speak to them once every few months, some speak to them only very rarely. But ultimately, when you do have the conversation with them, they know it's a love that's unbreakable, or we hope it's unbreakable. And that should be the same with shul and with synagogue. It should be a relationship that we can always build upon. But it's a loving shoulder, sometimes to cry on, or an arm round in times of joy, and a hug in times of joy. And the shul has a whole, can be so many things at different times to different people. So in terms of going back to your question, in terms of Chaitovitz, I can't be sure that the former rabbi at Stanmore is a relative, but it seems ironic that many of my family are ministers or rabbis of synagogues around the world. And if you look back and the amount of people with that name that are involved in synagogue, it just must be a part of the DNA to be a part of shul life.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. So you got a question there. Is that Gwen? You got a question, have you?
Yes, hello. Hello, Rabbi Chait.
Hi, Gwendy. How are you?
I don't know if you remember me. I belong to Newcastle UHC, as you know. I belong to Newcastle UHC. Oh, by the way, I've got a warm garus from David Oliver. You remember him? I think you were Kuppikadushing in Harrogate for his son, were you?
Correct.
Do you remember? I just wanted to ask, how many these days, how many Eden are in Leeds now, and how many identify of the many that are there? How many identify with Yiddishkeit and and come to shul and identify with the community of those that are in Leeds now?
It's a very good question, and I think we've got 3 minutes left, Stephen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be as brief as I possibly can, but informative at the same time. So, in terms of the amount of numbers, I mean, traditionally, the numbers of Jews in Leeds were always taken from synagogue memberships. But listen, as we all know, the first thing that used to happen when you got married was which shul we're going to join. That does not happen with newlyweds nowadays. That's not the first thing on their agenda on the Monday after they get married. That's not on the agenda now. In terms of the amount of people in Leeds, it's hard to say. It is hard to say. I know the synagogues, the 3 main synagogues in Leeds, have huge memberships, huge amounts of people associated. And again, I always think it's a massive responsibility and opportunity to try and reach out to those people and bring them in. And bring them in doesn't mean at synagogue service. Bring them in terms of relationship, connection, trust, events. It could be a whole range of things for different people at different times. So it's not always for me about how many people come to shul. It's about, does the person have a relationship with the shul? And I think that is something perhaps maybe a little bit unique in our strategy, certainly in our synagogue. I always think when you ask somebody, whenever I go to an event and I see another rabbi, they always say to me, how many come on a Shabbos? How many come on a Shabbos? It's one of those things that you get asked a lot. Yeah, I'm a realist. And I think it's important to be to know where you are, because if you know where you are, you know where you can go. I think that on a Shabbat we are anywhere between 40 to 60 on a Shabbat when there's very little going on, and that has gradually increased. I'm not going to be one of those people who tells you there's 100 people every week. It's 40 to 60, and again, it could be on the lower side, it could be on the upper side, depending on the weather, depending on the weekend, what's going on, whether Leeds United are playing, and as much as I think that shouldn't be part of the thinking, I hope it's certainly not the case. Anyway, but I am finding that as bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and all these events are coming back to shul, that people are increasing their attendance. And ironically, last Shabbat we had a very large bat mitzvah, and some of the people that they invited to the simcha are people that haven't been to shul over the last 2-3 years, because people are out of the habit, people are out of the tradition, the sense of duty has perhaps waned a little bit, and it's a real opportunity when you have a simcha in a shul and people are there with joy in their heart and ready to really engage with the service. That is certainly, from our perspective, a real opportunity to make an impact. The service should be as wonderful as it can be, accessible, enjoyable. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I did something very different for Shabbat Chanukah. I didn't give the traditional sermon. I got everybody upstanding, and we had a little quiz. If you thought the answer to the question was Gregor's, you had to stand here like this. And if you thought the answer to the question was Megillah's, you had to stand here like this. And we went down till we had a winner. And I have to tell you, I had more replies and more compliments on the sermon that day than anything I've ever done in the last 10 years. Because I think it's important that we do think differently and not be afraid to take different steps than we did previously, because the world has changed. So in answer to your question, there's a lot of Jewish people here in Leeds. Synagogue attendance is something we work on a lot. And we want to make it accessible, enjoyable, not force anybody, God forbid, to be in shul. But hopefully that when they do come, it's something that they really enjoy being a part of.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you again for joining us. Thanks everyone for joining us today. That was very interesting. And we'll hopefully one day we will take you up on your offer and have you down in Edgware for either visiting Rabbi, visiting Chazan or whatever. But we'll arrange that one day anyway. But lovely having you join us today. Some insights to the Jewish community in Leeds. And have a good week, everyone. And we'll see you all again next week with another speaker. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Having me. God bless you all.
Bye. Bye.